Let's start today with a short history lesson. For almost 40 years, Intel defined modern computing. Their processors powered personal computers, servers, universities, corporations, and governments. The famous x86 architecture became the standard language of software. Developers assumed Intel would always be there, and the entire industry built around that assumption. But today, Intel faces what I call the Intel dilemma. The very system that made them powerful may now prevent them from adapting to the future.
So is Intel simply making bad business decisions? Wrong strategy, wrong engineers, wrong leadership?
That's a very common interpretation, but history usually isn't that simple. Intel's engineers are among the best in the world. The real issue is strategic inertia, the difficulty of changing direction when your entire organization was built for a different era.
Strategic inertia. You mean the company cannot move fast enough?
Exactly. Think about Intel's success. For decades, the industry believed the CPU was the brain of every computer. Software executed sequential instructions, and CPUs were optimized to execute those instructions faster every year.
But AI workloads are different, right?
Precisely. AI workloads are not primarily sequential. They rely on massive parallel mathematical operations, especially matrix multiplications. GPUs and specialized accelerators turned out to be better suited for that type of work.
So Intel should have shifted toward that earlier?
In hindsight, yes. But inside Intel's worldview, the logical assumption was that the CPU would remain the center and accelerators would remain secondary.
So Intel believed the CPU would orchestrate everything?
Exactly. CPUs coordinate, GPUs assist. That was the model. But AI flipped that relationship. Suddenly, the GPU cluster became the center of computation, and CPUs became supporting infrastructure.
That sounds like a massive shift in architecture.
It is. In fact, it's a paradigm shift in computing architecture. When paradigms shift, companies optimized for the old paradigm often struggle.
But Intel saw AI coming, didn't they?
They did. Intel invested heavily in AI research, accelerators, and new chip designs, but timing matters. By the time Intel reacted fully, developers had already standardized on other ecosystems.
You mean Nvidia?
Yes, Nvidia invested early in making GPUs programmable through CUDA. Researchers adopted it, universities taught it, startups built their pipelines on it, and once that ecosystem formed, switching became very difficult.
So software ecosystems matter more than hardware performance.
Often, yes. Hardware can be replaced. Software ecosystems are incredibly sticky. Developers build careers around tools, companies build products around frameworks.
And then Apple made its own chips.
Exactly. Apple Silicon was another shock to the industry. Apple demonstrated that vertical integration and custom silicon could outperform traditional CPU platforms. Suddenly, Intel was no longer the only viable path.
So Intel wasn't being attacked directly.
That's a very good way to phrase it. Intel wasn't defeated directly. The industry simply routed around it.
But why didn't Intel just abandon the old architecture and build something new?
History tells us that incumbents rarely abandon their core business quickly. Intel had millions of customers depending on x86 compatibility. Enterprises, governments, cloud providers, all relying on stability.
So they were trapped by their own success.
In a nutshell, yes. Supporting legacy systems meant Intel couldn't redesign everything overnight, while competitors built clean slate architectures optimized for AI.
So this is really about technology roadmaps and timing.
Exactly. Technology leadership is not only about invention, it's about choosing the right roadmap at the right time.
And Intel's roadmap assumed the CPU would remain the center of computing.
Correct. But AI shifted the center toward accelerators, parallel architectures, and specialized silicon.
So the lesson isn't that Intel engineers failed.
No, not at all. Intel's engineers are extraordinary. The lesson is that industry structure can change faster than corporate assumptions.
Have we seen this before in the semiconductor industry?
Oh yes, many times. AT&T's Bell Labs helped invent the transistor, yet AT&T's semiconductor business eventually disappeared. Companies like Fairchild Semiconductor, once dominant, vanished after spawning entire generations of new firms. Even DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, a giant of computing, collapsed when personal computers changed the market.
So dominance in one era does not guarantee survival in the next.
Exactly. In technology, the past does not protect you from the future.
Thank you, Professor. This gives me a much better insight into road mapping and technology strategy in the semiconductor industry.
You're welcome. And remember this lesson. When companies become too confident in their dominance, the market eventually pushes back. History has told us that again and again. In fact, the probability is not small that Intel may never fully recover its former position. Because in technology, when the architecture of computing changes, entire empires can disappear.